Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to our community town hall. I am your host, Tony Lindsay, and once again, I'm here. I'd like to thank you guys for joining us. And we all know at the community town hall, this is where your voice matters. I've created this platform as a sort of a voice for the people because quite often we see so much going on and so many people who tend to be speaking on our behalf in the mainstream media and other platforms. And I created this platform so that we can get some form of representation of, or a more authentic representation of the things that we truly care about and the things that affect us directly in our lives. So with that being said, I want to welcome these brilliant brothers to the show today. First, I would like to introduce to you all Dr. Rick Wallace. He is a leading life and business strategist and the founder of the Odyssey Project and the Visionetics Institute. He's also the author of 24 books, including Born in Captivity, Psychopathology as a Legacy of Slavery, and Undoing the African American Mind. You've seen him on Dr. Boyce Watkins' Black Boss channel. He's a recurring contributor on the Sunrise Project, which is sponsored by the OWN Network. He's also the host of two radio shows, The Black Voice Reloaded Radio and The Teachers with Dr. Michael K. Blanchard, starting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. So welcome, Brother Wallace. I appreciate you being here today.
It's an honor. And I just want to thank you for bringing Dr. Manago and myself together. I actually have looked into him. Dr. Blanchard and I are constantly discussing his perspectives. And one of the things that I pride myself in as a learner, most people who consider themselves intellectuals consider themselves to be teachers. I consider myself to be a learner. So I'm always looking for people to learn from. I'm always open to new ideas beyond those I hold myself. The moment your mind becomes closed, you can't learn. And I have followed this brother for a while. So the honor is actually mine to be here in a situation where we get to talk about something that I think we're both passionate about.
Amen. All right. And I guess without further ado, my next guest, you've probably seen him on various mainstream media networks like BET, TV One, Fox News, C-SPAN, NBC, also alternative media platforms like the Black News Channel and Roland Martin's Unfiltered. He's a regular on that show. Dr. Cleo Manago is a behavioral health and cultural analyst, a writer, educator, popular speaker, and Black African social justice and defense-focused human rights activist. He is the founder and CEO of the AMASSI Centers for Black Wellness and Culture, and the founder of Black Men's Exchange National, BMX, where he's also the chief advisor. His uniquely thoughtful perspectives, they've been featured in numerous journals, including the Black Scholar, Journal of Black Studies and Research, the Journal of Black Psychology, and the American Journal of Public Health. He's also the developer of the critically noted critical thinking and cultural affirmation methodology, a racism, oppression, trauma, trance breaking behavioral intervention. And that's something that I look forward to getting into you with as well. So welcome, Brother Manago. It's an honor to have you on here today.
It's an honor to be invited. Thank you. And it's an honor to be with you. And it's definitely an honor to be with Dr. Rick as well. You were talking about all his books. I was like, damn. I mean, because all those titles resonated with things that concern me as well. So I got to get all 27 if I can afford it. But anyway.
We'll make that happen. We'll make that happen. Don't worry about it.
Cool. Excellent. Good. Okay. But thank you. I'm honored to be here.
All right. Absolutely. Thank you. Now, the title of this panel that we're here today is Breaking the Chains of Codependency to Whiteness. And I know that sounds like a provocative title there, but I think it's something that's very important for us to discuss. It's a very necessary conversation. Now, what prompted this live today was I saw not a tweet, I'm sorry, it was a Facebook post that was shared by Dr. Wallace. and it was a quote from you, so I just would like to share it with everyone. It says, "You know who resents Black people who refuse to comply with the system more than anyone else? Black people. There are people very uncomfortable with and resentful of Blacks not adaptive or codependent to whiteness, and many of them are Black." And wow, that really hit me in the feelers there. So I'd like you, if you could elaborate a little bit more on what you meant in as it pertains to the the um this codependency to whiteness that we've often heard discussed, but not really enough or thoroughly explained.
Well, one of the limitations of social media is you need to be brief and to the point to get people to actually take a listen to what you say. If you go on too long, that you might lose people. And one of the misgivings I have about that quote is that it's not fully in context. Black people are codependent to whiteness, not because of some kind of genetic inferiority complex. I mean, we, at this late stage in our generational time here, we only know whiteness. That's our frame of reference. Unlike Asians and Latinos and other people, their frame of reference, even colonized Latinos know where they came from literally in terms of where their foremothers and forefathers are from. They still know that information. And they can, and everybody in the Western world can go directly to their past where they came from, except for us in terms of absolute clarity. So as a result of a domestication process, we're white codependents, not by choice. I mean, for example, most of us only speak English. English is literally a traumatization of our spirit. The language itself is full of anti-Black implications that we use on a normal basis. And separate from that, Black people have been trained to not be human, but to be a race. We are racialized. We're the only people that say stuff like, sit your Black ass down, you Black, blankety, blank, blank, blank. White people and other people don't say sit your white ass down. They don't racialize themselves as something other than human. And again, these are not choices that we made. This is what we inherited. And it's important to talk about the domestication process. And I'll be brief because I want to hear from Dr. Rick. But the domestication is a serious word that we rarely reference to ourselves as human beings, but we have indeed been domesticated. How dogs are domesticated to be codependent to human beings, and this started some thousands of years ago. If a dog or a coyote or a wolf in particular, if a puppy came out rebellious and was biting or resisting, they killed that puppy. The ones that were passive and wagged their tails and couldn't wait to see them, they were allowed to live. Even today, if you go to a dog shelter, the dogs that bark at the people that serve them food, or they put a fake hand into the cage to see if the dog's going to bite the hand or not, and that dog is killed. The ones that get to live are the ones who wag their tails and are happy. That's what happened to Nat Turner. That's what happened to Lasante Overture. That's what happened to Winnie Mandela. A lot of people, if they step up, they're compromised. So we're living in the shadow of people who have been compromised. Now, warriors are born every day. We got two of them beyond myself right here. And then there's Aaron Magruder, and there's a few others who are born anyway. But on a larger scale, the domestication process is alive and well. Their new agenda is to make us all fall in love with white folks as partners. It's biracialization that you might have seen if you watch TV, that it's hard to find two Black people in love with each other in the most popular brainwashing system in this country, which is TV. And that's also to perpetuate the domestication and frankly, to use Black bodies as surrogates for white supremacy. Now, if you need me to break that down, I'll do that later because I've been talking too much, but they're literally using Black bodies to make up for their inability to reproduce.
Wow. Yeah, I totally agree. So it's really manifesting itself in a mental slavery, so to speak. That dependency, it's not just with just the economic mechanisms and all those other things that keep us get tied into this system, but it's the mental slavery that really has the most powerful hold over us. Dr. Wallace.
I think that the first thing that I would like to point out is that in study or in scientific observation, there's this thing called statistical significance.
Right.
And what statistical significance is, it is a certain set point where if things are consistent beyond that point, it can't be explained away by coincidence, by chance. There has to be an answer for it. I'm one that isn't given at all to the idea of coincidence. I believe in the universal law of causality. There's cause and effect. If something is happening, there's a reason for it happening. Now, in statistical significance, when something starts to happen at a level that it starts to impact the whole, then we need to discover what the causality is, because there's a negative impact that's impacting all. What Dr. Manago has explained is what Dr. Naeem Akbar called the psychological chains of slavery. And basically, it's the same thing, the domestication. It is, I'll take away everything, your identity, your name, your spirituality, all your values, interests, and principles, all the things you relate to, everything that you can connect to that gives you hope. That's how I enslave you. That's how I take someone in shackles, remove the shackles, and they don't leave, is that I implement a new ideology. I take you out of an Afrocentric awareness and I put you inside of a Eurocentric awareness where you don't fit. So you automatically, because you don't have your own, you're looking for an identity. Your only identity is given to you within the sphere that you don't belong. So immediately you adopt an inferiority complex.
Yep.
And so now you want to fit in. So you do what dogs do. You become subservient. You become obedient. You become demanding. If you watch dogs, the most obedient dog will discipline the ones who are more radical and don't want to behave. That's how you train dogs. You take the most obedient dog and you sit up and you just leave them be. They'll do everything from potty train them to make them sit still till you get home, to everything. That's the domestication. And so what Dr. Akbar called the psychological chains of slavery, Dr. Manago called domestication. It's the same thing. It's taking someone, putting them in an environment that they are not naturally inclined to, and then saying this is where you exist. And because you have no connectivity, and that is the difference between every other group of people that have migrated to the US. Have you ever noticed that outside of whiteness, in America, it tells you the power of the system and how the system is set up specifically to operate? Have you ever noticed that every other group outside of whites are hyphenated? Asian Americans, Latin Americans,
yes.
Black Americans, African Americans. Everything is hyphenated. What it says is my whiteness makes me an American.
Yep.
And you are a subculture of my whiteness. And so therefore I hold supremacy.
Yes.
And it's an idea that has no real true truth, but because we are what we perceive to be and what we accept, their power is held in place.
Wow.
And the whole reason that there's this division that's constantly pushed within the media, which is one of the most powerful entities available, the reason that there's this constant division, like, the division between black men and black women, which truly, actually, I think Dr. Curry has presented a great deal of evidence in studies that show that how it's portrayed that black women don't trust black men isn't truly what it is. There's a new study now that I'm actually doing a peer review on that is presenting that in large perspective, black women actually think highly of black men. But what you get is the snapshot of everything that's wrong, just like black on black crime. I did a write-up on what I call the black on black crime myth. Does it mean that there isn't violence among us as blacks? No, what it means is until you start discussing white on white crime, which happens at violent crime, let's say murder in particular, 84% of white people are killed by other white people. It's a proximal thing. It has nothing to do with true. Now, the higher levels comes from desperation and despair. You put people in hope. Criminology 101 tells me if I take away your hope, I take away your ability to function, crime will go up, despair will go up, violence goes up. It doesn't matter the race, but it's how we present it through media that sits up and places us in that place. So I'm going to step back, but the whole idea of that what I shared is, and I'm glad that he mentioned that it can easily be taken out of context, and I'm glad that he added context to it. And the context is this: none of the things that we're in, like when I wrote Born in Captivity, Psychopathology as a Legacy of Slavery, we're talking about the robbing of our identity. And that we actually see a bunch of the behaviors that are antisocial in our communities as a part of our culture, because that's how it's been fed to us.
That's right.
It's not an inherent part of the culture. It's a behavioral part of the culture, because we've been placed in it and we've been told this is who we are hyper violent, we're hypersexual, and all of the other negative connotations.
Right. So that's wow. That's so on point. I mean, we were having a town hall discussion yesterday, and one of the contributors made a point that we don't know who we are. And when you have robbed people of their identity and stripped them away from their culture, they're left to pretty much figure things out. So, of course, when you force feed them through media propaganda, through certain systems that are set up to tell them that they are less than, that they are other, the othering of people, the defaulting of whiteness to everything being good and worthiness. So that really does a number on your psychological, fortitude. Now, my question, I'm really interested to know what your perspectives are on the role that Black leadership plays in this equation. Now, we understand the brainwash. Go ahead, brother.
Black leadership, please.
And you know what? Yes, because yes, you're right. Because I was going to say generally accepted Black leadership.
Accepted by who?
By, let's say, the mainstream, the ones that are allowed the platform.
Did you say white? What's up? He can't say white?
Yeah. Well, yeah, right. Yeah. White designated leadership.
I mean, if it's not co-signed and accepted by the white mainstream, then we don't see it as leadership. That's why we have a bunch of failed movements over the last 60 years, is because we kept looking for replacements for Malcolm and Martin.
Yes.
And we got a lot of people who inserted themselves, and we still see the same thing happening right now. And I want to pass this on to Dr. Manago, because I think he can elaborate on it a little better than me. But my thing is, when you talk about leadership, one of my most repeated quotes is, the greatest threat to Black progress is a Black face with a white agenda.
Yeah.
And you got to understand that these agendas are oftentimes hidden and you don't see it. You got a bunch of people who've been hollering Black power for a long time and having the means through which to empower Blacks, but it doesn't serve them well. And so you get bamboozled. And so I think that's a great threat right now. I think the way that you actually execute leadership is through action. I think that you have to be aware of what's going on. I think you have to have these type of discussions, and I think you have to put minds together that search for solutions. One of the problems that we have is because we've always been in a place of impotency, is that we don't seek the answer. You can sit up and tell somebody something, and the first thing they look for is a reason to tell you why it can't be done.
That's right.
We love to talk about the problem, but very rarely do we discuss the solution. Yeah. And so what happens is, I look at people when they show up, I don't want to hear, okay, America's a racist. Man, I was born into that knowledge. Right.
What
okay,
next?
Okay, this is happening, that's happening. Okay, I understand that. How do we deal with it? How do we confront it? So how do we reestablish an identity? And then I'm going to say this and I'm going to pass it on. Dr. Manago made a very clear point about the connection to heritage. And the fact that if you follow, especially Arabs and Asians are very, very in tune with their heritage, where they come from, what they stand for, their history. And I've seen in situations that I know personally where if they feel their children are becoming too domesticated, they will literally ship them back home to stay for a while until they get, till they get reacclimated and understand, because they don't want them completely domesticated. They want them to take advantages of what is available here, but they don't want them to become more attuned to being American. That's the whole group concept of assimilation. Most Blacks are more in tune with being Americans than they are with the true nature of who they are as a collective. Yet they have been racialized more than any other group. I want to be American, but everybody else sees me as Black before, and I even subconsciously see myself as Black. That's why everything is talked about from the perspective of Blackness, like he mentioned. Sit your black down, all the stuff that we normally say growing up that we don't think about, that no other group does, It's because we have no true identity. We were racialized in the beginning, so that's how we see ourselves. And then so all they have to do now, in simple, is create a negative image of what we identify with. So then we naturally see ourselves as inferior, and we constantly try to find a way to assimilate to be accepted. And so that goes back to the initial quote. And the initial quote was what the point about how resentful people who assimilate are against those of us who refuse to.
Right.
And there's your answer.
Well, really quickly, I would, because there are those who are watching this and who will watch this that will say, okay, well, in those examples you gave of, Arabs and Asians, and when they see that their kids are getting a little too domesticated, they send them back home to kind of straighten them up, reconnect them with their heritage. What do you say to Black Americans who are here and they don't have that connection? They don't have somewhere to send their kids back to. Like, how would you address that issue?
Well, first of all, from my perspective, and I hope I don't forget your question because I have to preface it with this comment.
Okay.
We have to be perpetually strategic at all times. We have to never not be strategic.
Right.
We have to always be strategic. For example, earlier you asked about leadership, and I mentioned, well, who you call, who you talking about, and then you mentioned terms like mainstream, etc. We have to start. Let me preface it one more time. From my perspective, you've already heard me talk about this. Black people are in a trance. We're not fully present. We're not fully psychically stable in our bodies and minds. We're on automatic pilot, and the pilot is white. We're not fully we're not fully present. We're distracted and disoriented and in a trauma trance. I say that because that means that everything that those of us as leaders and supposedly conscious people do have to be trance-breaking behavior. Trance-breaking behavior is behavior that's very intentional. For example, when you talk about leadership, it's important to say who the leaders are and why they're leaders. Dr. Rick already broke it down, but that should be part of how we even present the questions. Like, wait a minute, why is this person a leader?
That's right.
Why are they a leader? And then we have to wait for an answer, because a lot of people, we're so hopeful for a leader. We're so desperate for sometimes to see a Black face doing something. So it can be the devil, but we're glad that they're there because we have this perspective of ourselves, of seeing ourselves as being lesser than, and we want to feel better about ourselves by seeing Black people in white spaces.
Right.
So we have to actually deconstruct that. There's also some inadvertent mistakes that we keep making. And even as we try to advise our children, for example, one of the advices is you got to be twice as good as the white man. You've heard that before, right?
Yes. Yep.
Well, that's an unfinished story that sets up Black people to think that they're twice as inferior. The whole story is you have to be twice as good because white people are twice as corrupt. So you have to make sure they know that it's not you that's the problem.
That's right.
Right.
And that you have to work twice as hard because of a problem in a society that we're working on, baby. I love you. The love your part is important. And we're working on it, but it's not because something's wrong with you, baby. It's because the system has these problems that I want to help you get through. So you got to work twice as hard, but not because you're twice as bad.
Right.
And often that part is not included in the narrative that we get the children.
Full context is not provided.
Right.
So I just gave a strategic consideration in terms of how we deal with our children. And also, even though Dr. Mayim Akbar made the statement he made about the slavery chain, terms like that, which are important to us as scholars, are powerful. But everyday Black people are not moved by those terminologies. But we know what domestication means. Most of us know what that means. Most of us know about domestic cattle, domestic dogs. And when I go places and speak to young people and say that you've been domesticated, they go, what? Yeah, you've been domesticated. And when I break down what happened to Fannie Lou Hamer, who was beat almost to death because she resisted not being able to vote, and talk about Nat Turner and accept these people who could not be complacent in the midst of their disrespect, and they were not domesticated enough, they get that. They go, oh shit. And then they look at themselves about, am I domesticated? I don't want to go out like that.
Right.
Because they can grasp that idea. So my point is that we have to start talking to each other in ways that's trans breaking. We can't be all scholarly. We can't be all abstract. We can't be all academic. That's cute, if you will, when we're on the academic stage or when we're in an academic context that requires scholarly analysis. But most of our people don't benefit from that. In terms of that being the conduit for communication, we have to talk to people where they are in language that they can get. So all that to say is that when we say the terms like Black leadership, we have to mention why, who I call Obama. Y'all call her Kamala Harris, but I call her Obama. We have, because she's really the second coming of the Obama agenda. We need to talk about why she's there. As a matter of fact, I won a lot of money because I predicted that it was going to be Kamala who got into the White House way before she was even selected, because I thought she might be the president. I said she's going to be the president or the vice president. It's going to happen.
She's going to be the president, though.
Because she is perfectly white for the job. She's a passive white ass kissing, literally a lot of white people at home and at work. And so so we need to stop being, my point though is that we need to stop being mad at the Obamas and understand that the Obamas are at the other end of a marionette's line. You know what I'm saying? We be getting mad at the wrong people. We be getting mad at the wrong people.
Yes.
We be calling people coons and all these other kind of things as if they're independently self-hating. And then no such thing as an independently self-hating Black person. They don't exist. Another thing is that there's no such thing as an accidental pattern. If it's a pattern, it's not an accident. That's why I say Obama, because it's not an accident that the first president and the first vice president are mixed, are half white. No. So we have to stop being abstract. We got to make black people understand that. That's why I talk about how we talk to children. See, some of us don't want their little hearts broken.
Mm-hmm.
We talk in these mass ways to it. I was walking down the street recently with my family in Los Angeles, and we all Black, and we have a family member who was complaining about racism at their job, and they said, there's this white one. And I said, why are you whispering white? Y'all see that before? We all Black, we grown. Why are you whispering? Well, I don't ask rhetorical questions, and I waited for the answer. They did not know why they were whispering because we don't self-evaluate on behalf of getting out of white supremacy trance.
Oh, man.
So I told her, I said, you whispering white because you got what I call Cato-Kalin syndrome. Now, y'all might be too young to know what I mean by that. But Cato-Kalin was a white boy who lived on a multi-million-dollar man named O.J. Simpson's property for free. I'm from LA. I know what the guest house looked like.
Right.
It was like a little mansion that this white was living in for free. And OJ wouldn't have let a Black person do that. So that's why I call it Cato-Kalinism, because it was white people live in our mind for free, and we need to evict them. Well, we're not going to evict them until we understand that something is wrong with white supremacy. We think something's wrong with being Black people, and too many times we are mad at Black people. See, I'm not mad at Black people for being white codependents. I have compassion for Black people for being white codependents. And because my body language and my approach is compassion instead of having an attitude and calling them coons, we wind up engaging each other.
That's right.
And through compassionate engagement, I work with them to walk out of the trauma trance, because it's not our fault. We're angry about people like Obama, et cetera, but it's not even their fault. No. So all that to say is that we have to start, and I'm being redundant to make my point because I don't see it made enough, being compassionate strategists against the trauma trance and how we engage Black people and how we treat Black people. And we have to stop getting mad at Black people. I always say being mad at Black people for being self-hating is like being mad at somebody for limping after a car crash. They limp because they're in a car crash. So we have to stop. I'm very serious about this because I see too much inter-community abuse. And as a result of community abuse, Black people go to white supremacy for sanctuary.
Wow.
They go into the devil's den for sanctuary because it's too painful to be around Black people because there's too much misdirected rage. We're not directing it to where it should be directed.
Where it's supposed to go. That's right.
That's also a post-slavery behavioral phenomena, because during slavery, when we were murdered for coughing too loud, our survival tactic was to be silenced in their presence, and we took it out on each other. But we have to talk to each other, to Black people, understand that we don't have to keep those patterns up no more. It's kind of like so-called soul food was giving us heart disease and cancer. We don't have to eat that stuff no more. We don't have to romanticize cholesterol and high blood pressure factors anymore. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But you had a question. What was your question? You asked me a question, and I got so caught up in the preface that I forgot the question.
No, you actually answered my next question.
You answered it. Go ahead.
Yeah, you pretty much answered it, because I was going to ask you, basically as a relatively conscious person, any Black person who considers them to be more aware than others, it can be very, very frustrating. And that's why sometimes it kind of culminates in the rage, the hostility, the coon.
Let me ask you a question. And I'm sorry, Rick, I'm gonna shut up in a minute. Do you have any children?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Have your children ever pissed you the hell off? Well, in your psyche, because you love them, I imagine, particularly being a conscious person, that it doesn't even cross your mind to dehumanize them just because you're mad at them. You never want to cut right. So that's how we have to treat all Black people.
Brother, I gotta say something. What you just said to me is something that my father told me for so many years, and it has always stayed with me. My father, he's a pastor, right? And he's gone through a lot of stuff, like, in the church, how it can be, the politics of the church. And I would be furious all the time. And I'm like, Daddy, why don't you do this? Why don't you do? And you know what he said to me? He said, well, Tony, how can I help them if I'm angry at them? And basically what you're saying, it's the same thing. How can you resolve it if you cannot get past your anger? And, him telling me something like that, it really impacted the way that I deal with my children. Me personally, I've never spanked my kids, none of them, and they are beautiful, well-rounded children. They're critical thinkers. They're independent, and they don't require abuse in order to get them to do things. And I think that's also part of the legacy of slavery, where you feel. Go ahead, brother.
It definitely is a legacy of slavery. And so what you have to understand is we've literally been conditioned. I think that some insight that I received, and first of all, I want to double back to the point that Dr. Cleo makes about being able to modernize the same statement where it actually resonates with the people it needs to reach. One of the things that my journalism teacher had to teach me in journalism in high school was why do we read? Why do we write? Because if you're going to be a writer, you need to understand that. Yes, you can go places with your vocabulary. Yes, you can go places with your ability to articulate in ways that sounds great. But how many people actually understand it? We write to reach.
That's right.
And when you're not speaking to reach or speaking to the people that you are trying to reach, you actually alienate them.
Yes.
So, like I said, I've studied Dr. Arbaugh for an unimaginable amount of time. He was very instrumental in my approach to dissecting Eurocentric psychology and then reconstructing it to fit the Black experience. But again, what Dr. Cleo has done is actually take something that was said that actually will be insulting to most people who are actually in the trenches of this experience. It's actually insulting. Take it and say it in a way that automatically incites a desire to change.
That's right.
Nobody wants to be domesticated.
That's right.
And so the other thing about and I'm one of those people, like I'm always saying on my channel, I never use that C word. I don't even say it. I never use that C word when referring to a brother. Now I say once I declare that a Black man is absolutely not on the side of Blacks, that he's obviously totally jumped ship and it's about him and he totally sides, then he's fair game. And even then I don't call him that word because I think that comes from the legacy of slavery as well, where I can't really go after who I really want to go after. So guess who's going to be the recipient of my rage? Who's going to be the recipient of my rage? Now that's a traumatic injury that nobody wants to talk about. We'll talk about all the other things that pass down as a means of trauma, but we don't want to talk about the fact that we don't address the impact of whiteness, and we turn in on one another, and we get to the point to where we're at right now. So that particular point has to be made. It has to be an understanding that I can't reach you if I alienate you. I can't reach you if you look at me and you see me being condescending, or you see me as someone who thinks they're better than you. That's why when I'm discussing what's going on, I tend to use the term we a lot.
Yes.
Even though my personal behavior isn't there, I'm telling you I relate to you. I'm telling you that if you're in it, I'm in it with you. That's right. And I'm telling you that we're coming out of it together. And that's how I see it. And the thing is, we saw the negative side of that forever. I grew up in a household, I was reared by my great-grandparents. And actually, I am old enough to remember that entire O.J. Simpson trial. But I grew up in a house with my great-grandparents. I was reared by my grandmother's parents. And one of the things, little phenomenons that you didn't pay attention to then, but when you start to be a student of human behavior, you start to go back and ask yourself why. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Cleo painted a clear picture, so I don't have to revisit it, but I just want to make a point about how we relate and how we're racialized. There's a new, back then, that's when the news came on at 5 and 6 o'clock. Nobody watches the news as much as they used to. Now it's the CN. It's not so much local, but everything's national and cable and being social media. But back then, grandparents would sit down, 6 o'clock news, and they would get to the headline story. The headline stories are always about crime.
Yes.
And they would start talking about suspect does this and blood does this and that. And before they can finish the story, they haven't showed the picture yet. My grandmother's already going, Lord, please don't let this man be black. Now, the thing is, that man has nothing to do with you. He's not related to you. He in no ways connected to you, but you have already learned that you are associated with him, whether you like it or not. Mm. And people are going to judge you based off of what he did, and you've never met him.
Yeah.
But that's what happens when you are in a racial caste system and no one else has to defend their race.
And what happens when you came out of the most dehumanizing several centuries that are imaginable, and you won't talk about it? I mean, Jews, and I know this, and I know you all know this, they have a mantra, it's never again.
That's right.
And their children know never again. And often our contrasting mantra is when they're going to do it again, as opposed to never again. Because we are raising our children to where they don't even want to talk about that we have been enslaved and what we went through. That's a mistake. The reason the Jews reference never again, because they're referencing the Holocaust. They're telling their children, this happened to us again, and we're not going to let it happen again. What we do is very different. We say, let's ignore that, get a good job, be twice as good as the white man, go to church and pray to a white God, and we do all these things that keep us in the trance. Now, none of it is intentional, but I'm just breaking down some of our norms so we can come out of the trance. And I want to tell a short story to make this point in terms of the people watching, understanding how the trauma trance works and how being outside of the trauma trance works. And this is white folks. I was asked to speak at Brown University to the faculty, and there's a lot of faculty at Brown University. And I asked the white faculty members to stand up. I said, "Get up, white folks." And I said it just like that, just to be dramatic and see them resist, because they didn't want to get up when I talked anyway. But I put some smell on it to make them even more. Wait a minute, should I get up? But I said, "Get up, white folks." And the white folks got up. And there were black people in the audience as well. I said, white folks, have you ever been to Kinko's or to Walmart or to Bank of America or to Apple and had bad service or had to bring back a product that was not working properly and they didn't give you good service? Of course, they all said yes. I said, did you say white people can't do shit right? white folks, they always messing up. They just can't get it together. Did that kind of thought ever enter your mind? And the thought was so abstract. They were like, huh? What? And the black folks knew where I was going. That was in the audience. So they were sitting there thinking, I hope he don't make us stand up. But anyway, I said, when you went to Bank of America and they drew your account by accident, did you say crackers just can't get it right? They're just gonna do nothing right. And they were like, are you serious? I said, please answer the question. And they said, of course not. I said, okay, sit down, white folks. I said, black people get up. And the black people were looking at each other because they were concerned about being shamed in public, which I would never do.
Good.
Said, black folks, you can sit back down now. I'm not going to shame you in public, but y'all know what I'm thinking, right? Y'all know what's going on, right? I want y'all to know this, black people, that even when white folks are the victims of a serial killer, they never resort to talking about white people ain't shit and getting mad at all white folks and racializing themselves.
Right.
But you need to understand that you learn how to racialize yourself from these people who will not racialize themselves. So look at what's going on here. You're all accomplished members of the faculty of Brown University. So clearly you are walking examples of black genius and black capacity. So why are you still doing what I made you self-conscious about when I asked you to stand up? And the white people just didn't know what I was talking about. This was a black conversation.
Completely out.
Right.
And I let them know. I said, you're here because you're part of the faculty, but I came to talk to them. Not because I don't care about you, but you already know enough about who you are not to dehumanize yourself. I want to talk to my brothers and sisters who still need to learn that because of what your people do and have done to them.
That's
and,
right.
and then a white boy in the audience said, I didn't do nothing. I didn't do anything. I said, well, regardless of what you think you did or did not do, I want you to look at the difference between you and black people when it comes to behavior based on what white people benefit from and what they've done to black people that still is in existence.
That's right.
So please sit down.
Yeah, I was gonna say, did he sit down?
He sat down. I said, because I'm not blaming it on you, but I said, I don't even want to get into a conversation about whether I blame you or not. I want to talk to the black people who are in their mind right now concerned about you.
Right.
Instead of each other. I want the black people to be concerned about each other instead of being codependent, which is, the theme of this discussion.
Yes.
Unconsciously, if not consciously, codependent about, because some of y'all going, I hope he don't hurt him to this white boy. I hope he don't offend him for this white boy.
Oh Lord. Yeah.
But did you think that, did you worry about each other when I asked you to stand up? Or did you worry about yourself?
It was completely selfish. It was individual.
Trans breaking work.
You got to break the trance. That's a very good theme for this entire conversation. We got to break the trance. So here's the thing. Do you think that now we understand the trance that we are in, right?
No, we don't. You do.
Right. Not collectively, I'm speaking, but in reference to the trance that we're talking about, and a lot of it to me is rooted in very low self-esteem that has been just implanted into us. Are we waiting for white people to, I guess, get a conscience and decide to say, you know what? We're going to get our feet off of their neck. Like, what are we waiting for? Or is it just that we're just stuck in this perpetual state of how we view ourselves? Or are we waiting for them to finally say, all right, there you go, black folks, you're good now. We'll kind of take the pressure off.
We are.
I'm gonna go first because I want him to jump on what I say and expand. Okay. First of all, you use the term self-esteem. Understanding self-concept, self-image, and self-esteem and how that's developed, you have to understand something. In order to have self-esteem, you have to first have a sense of self. So there's a thing called vacant self-esteem, meaning that there's no esteem at all. Now, all esteem that acquired is what you can call faux self-esteem, which is actually built off of how you perceive a particular group. Let's call them white people. how you sit up and perceive, they perceive you.
Yes.
So your whole idea of self and the esteem you give yourself isn't based off of what you see in yourself, it's what you think they see. So in that instance, you can't help but wait on them to fix your problem because you don't have a sense of self strong enough to say, I can do it myself. You're still sitting up saying, they won't let me. I'm gonna pass it to Dr. Cleo and let him take that. I just had to put that in there.
No, that's true, and I hope my response is responsive, because when I mentioned the curriculum that our children often get, which includes you got to be twice as good as the white man, without the whole story. One thing that we are afraid to tell our children, because we don't want to offend the Cato Kalin who's still taking up space in our head, is that we live inside of an agenda. This is not a free, open, liberated democracy. This is an agenda we live in. We live in a white supremacist agenda. Now, people might want to find nice poetic words, so we won't hurt children's feelings or traumatize them, but we got to tell them the truth. That we live in a agenda, and you have to be twice as good, not because you're bad, but you got to be able to get beyond the agenda. Because what white supremacy mythology in the trance does is it makes us evacuate our own common sense. And what I mean by that is that every time you want to see something that's amazing among human beings, all you got to do is look to black folks. And you all know this. I mean, even though I have issues with the Williams sisters because they both, let me get into that. I'm talking about the tennis players. They were such bad sisters, they wound up having to play each other. They had beat the whole world, literally. Right. They had each other left. That's black. And we can go on and on and on historically in a contemporary world about the phenomenality of black people, but we can't see it because we're in the white supremacy trance. And we think that if we call it what it is, we're going to offend them. And that's more important to us than offending ourselves. As a matter of fact, we've been trained through the church that to be pro-black is sacrilegious, because it might offend God, who's white, and it might offend Jesus, who's white. Now, I think all of us in this meeting know that God and Jesus are not white.
That's right.
But we won't tell our children that. As a matter of fact, we perpetuate that myth with Santa Claus. And all kinds of white stuff that keeps us in the trauma trance and keep us not even recognizing what the Williams sisters did, what Tiger did, what Toni Morrison did, what the people who are working in science who are black did, what the Africans have done, what the people in East Africa who are called the Kemetic have done, what Imhotep have done. I mean, we've been going on and on with the stuff that we have done that's like, are you serious? We just got it going on. And the majority of the best baby scholars, I'm talking about children who go to college while being teens in the United States, are black.
That's right.
That's all.
Uh-oh. I think the signal. Okay.
All kinds, even twin babies at 12 years old, because people had more time to become wise by us because we're the first people. But our children are calling each other the N-word. And there's no such thing on the radio as a song that's the equivalent to I'm living my best life. I'm not going back and forth with those N-words. There's no Jewish songs. I'm not going back and forth with those kikes. I'm not going back and forth with those faggots. I'm not going back. We don't, you know what I'm saying? I mean, we need to understand, if we understand that there's an agenda, then and I literally teach a class called Watu Wajua, teaching black children critical thinking and cultural affirmation. They see when white people are doing their stuff, these babies go, there it is. I see the biracial agenda. I see the marginalization of black people. Because I teach, they could be taught as children. We have at the Amasi Center for Black, and we teach black parents how to be intentional black parents, how to teach their children to decode the world they live in, so they can see, oh, that's what Dr. Manago or one of my staff, I see in him to see. You can't. Somebody said I'm choppy. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you, just chopping a little bit here and there.
Yeah, you're chopping a little.
Okay, well, where did you miss? I don't want to.
No, we didn't miss anything. No,
Oh,
you're
okay,
coming
okay.
in and out.
The bottom line is that we're not being honest because we still have DNA level fear of white people, fear of white backlash. I have been places. I use personal stories to make my point so we can see how deep it is, so we can start doing the stuff that we do.
Right.
Right before COVID, I was on a Black mental health tour where I went to St. Paul, Minneapolis, Los Angeles, Atlanta, and some other places. And I asked the audience, among other things, I mean, a lot of things occurred, but I'm trying to get to the point. I asked the audience, did they talk to their children about police brutality, about Dylan Roof, about all these high profile assaults on Black people?
Mm-hmm.
And that they create invitational space among their children to see how they feel about this stuff that they know about because they live on planet Earth and they sit in front of the TV. They know about Dylan Roof. And I asked them, did you ask your children, did you check in with them? And ask them how they're doing and how they feel about what happened to Trayvon Martin when that happened? And the majority of these parents, some of them who were psychologists, hadn't done that.
Yeah. And that's no, go ahead.
Because we're trained on an unconscious basis not to offend white people at all cost, including at the cost to our own children's self-love and critical thinking capacity. They didn't even think, and guess what happened? And I can close with this, that blew their minds. The boys in particular in the audience started crying. There's a reason why Black men grow up, and many of us grow up and implode, because we never got permission as boys to be emotionally authentic around how the world affects us.
Right.
Stop that crying, etc. Anyway, let me shut up.
I do want to kind of meet that with just a brief story of my own, because I really relate to what you're saying. And I think, yes, we don't want to talk to our children about it. One, which is, it is rooted in not wanting to offend white people. But I also think it's also, I guess, a false sense of protection. You want to protect your children, even from the trauma that you yourself have experienced. But I don't think we realize how much our children absorb. And just real brief, like my son, I remember when Eric Garner was murdered. Around that time, and then there's just a whole bunch of stuff happening. You remember when it was like every 3 months a black man was just getting murdered by the cops? It just kept happening. Well, my son, he was around maybe 5 or 6, maybe 6 years old at the time, and I remember I went to go and pick him up from school, but I was late that day, so he was in the cafeteria with the teacher waiting, and I got there and I met my son there crying. He was just inconsolable. So I went and I'm like, son, what's wrong? And he said, Daddy, I thought the police killed you. Now, that's tough. And it was at that moment that I decided, because I was one of those people that wanted to protect my son from the information that he needed. And at that moment, I decided that I was not going to hide the reality of the world from my child. And I was going to foster a sense of critical thinking within him so he can better identify these markers and these indicators that are out there, so he can be better prepared. Yes. So now my son is 14 years old. That boy he's brilliant. I don't need to say anything to this kid. He identifies it. And he's not as jaded, I guess that's the word, as we tend to be. He's not as scarred.
He's learned to separate to separate his pain from who he really is.
Yes.
And what I usually say is we have to teach each other to separate our scar tissue from who we really are. And when you gave him that guidance as a baby, you prepared him to be who he is now. And he's very, very fortunate. And unfortunately, he's relatively unique. Not a lot of parents are doing that, not because they're bad people, because we have been trained to put ourselves second. If you saw the film about the maids, what was that film about the maids?
The Help.
In The Help, which was very problematic, but it showed how about the time the maids got home to their children, they were too tired to be bothered. Yeah. They had spent their whole day suckling, loving, holding,
Them white babies. Yep.
Those white babies. And then when they got home, they were so tired, they were relatively abusive. And those children needed them more than them. Almost cut. Them white people needed them. But that's an intergenerational phenomenon. And I'm glad that you told that story, because it's going to help people in your audience understand what they need to do. Because a lot of Black boys have a father who told them, don't cry. So they cried privately. And then when he got there, they sucked it in and everything. And then they wound up acting out as a child or an adult and wound up going to jail. Because we need to understand that you cannot resolve trauma in the abstract. And you cannot protect your children from trauma in a white supremacist society. They're going to be traumatized. It's guaranteed to be traumatized, but they can actually put it in context if they do what you did.
Right.
If your children recognize the corruption and go, oh, that's that corruption. Oh, I see it.
Yes.
I'm not happy. If we did that, we would be easily to take out of the trauma trance, and we would have less people that we resort to calling the C word.
And we would have a stronger generation to come behind us.
Yes, because I've heard Black children tell me, or Black former children who are now adults tell me that I went into whiteness for sanctuary from Black pain. I went there for sanctuary. I got tired of N-word. They call it N-word stuff because they have no analysis. They don't understand that the so-called N-word stuff is a trauma response to what these people did that you go into for sanctuary. They don't have that analysis, but they can get it. That's what point I want to make. I've done it with so many Black people who get it. They go, oh, I'm not going out like that. And as the model that you referenced when you read my bio called CTCA.
Okay.
CTCA stands for critical thinking and culture affirmation. And what the model does in short, because it's too complex to tell the whole thing, is that it creates a safe space with food and love and music and all kinds of ways we get Black people through the door. And then once they're in the door, we ask them trigger questions to help them. We don't tell people how to think. We don't do that. We create a context where they have no choice but to go, oh, shit.
That's right.
One of the exercises that we do is we ask them, name people who have contributed to human history that were not born in this country. And their whole list, when the list is over, is the bunch of white folks. We don't get mad at them. We don't get mad at them. We look at the list and we go very quietly and lovingly, because I teach my staff to be compassionate to Black people and to never be abusive, ever, under any circumstances, never be abusive.
That's right.
And we ask them, so honey, why do you think this list is what it is? And we don't even say what it is. We let them look at it. Look at it. Who's on this list? And it's all white. Y'all all Black. How come you don't know about people who've contributed to human history, not born in this country, who are from Africa or Cuba or Haiti? Why don't you know? And there's no rhetorical questions. They have to figure that out. And they tell us because nobody told us. Not me telling them. They tell us, well, we didn't know. We didn't know. I said, well, why don't you know? And to make a long story short, the model helps them to deconstruct their knowledge lens and where it came from and why it came from and what's wrong with it. And then the culture affirmation piece, now that they're hungry to find out stuff and they're open and they're not just in a cognitive space where, because you can tell somebody who's traumatized, don't take drugs. Well, if you don't deal with why they're traumatized, they're going to keep taking drugs regardless of the cognitive intellectual suggestions. So we get beyond the intellectual suggestions and get them to deconstruct themselves and figure out why they are the way they are and understand that you are the receiving end of somebody else's inferiority complex.
Yes, that's important.
And we call them white inferioritists, not white supremacists.
Thank you. See, that's so, oh man, it's so correct. My son has even identified that to me as a 14-year-old. He says, well, Dad, I know people talk about white supremacy, but isn't that more of like an inferiority complex? Why they project these things onto us? This is my kid telling me this.
You did it, though. You did it, Daddy.
Yeah.
Back when he was 5 and he was crying and you checked in with him and allowed him to be a human being who had the right to be a traumatized baby boy in the midst of all these murders of Black males, and you let him have that and let him engage and navigate through that, that's powerful.
Right. Talking about the theme of this particular segment is protecting our kids. One of the things I talk about a lot is the importance of holistic education. And we must learn to define education in the discussion as being more than the attainment of academic skills. I think that we've lost ourselves in teaching them skills. Skills prepare them to operate in the system.
That's right.
What we have to understand is holistic education is actually the empowerment and the preparation for our kids to grow up into adults who are able to go out into a world that is inherently hostile towards them and not only function, but thrive. And so what you have to do is you have to be honest with them. You have to show them what's out there, and you have to tell them it's okay. Especially when you're talking about Black males, one of the first things you got to communicate, it's okay to feel.
Yes.
It's okay to say you're hurt. It's okay to cry. It's okay to express yourself, because what happens is if you have the ability to cry, not crying doesn't change the fact that you are wasting a capacity that allows you to decompress.
That's right.
So when you're not decompressing, you're retaining. And eventually what happens is over time you're internalizing is you're looking good on the outside. You're saying I'm good. You're telling everybody I'm good. Your presentation says I'm good. But the problem is internally you are literally self-destructing, and eventually it's going to express itself overtly. That's and right. Then there's a problem. So the idea is to make sure that we teach our kids how to think critically. That's and right. So one of the things I constantly say on my channel is every time I come to you, I'm not telling you you have to think like me. I'm challenging you to think. I love it when you come back to me and say, I don't agree. Yeah. Now I'm just going to simply ask you why and from where you're drawing your conclusion. Now we're thinking. You're challenging me to think. Yes. And I'm giving you the space to think, and there's no judgment. We're not talking about right or wrong answers. We're talking about I got to go out and figure it out. Because what happens is what happens too, because we're in a system that wasn't created for us. Even at the beginning of school times, when you send your kid off to school, what happens? They're in an environment, especially if it's not an all Black situation. If it's an all Black situation, it's a little different. But if they're in mixed company, they are so afraid to be wrong with their answers, they never come up with them. So what they do is they start to piggyback off of the answers of everybody else. So now I'm defining my reality based on somebody else's perception. Dependency. And now I practice it at a level that I don't even know how to come to a conclusion on my own. So now I can't even fix my own dilemma because I'm not thinking. So the idea of thinking critically is you ask a question that is a leading question and directed in a certain way that provokes a certain answer, but you're not telling them what it is.
That's right.
But you're taking away all of the defaults. That's right. The Eurocentric idea of what is.
That's right.
And you're saying we're going to approach this from an Afrocentric perspective.
Yes.
But I'm not going to tell you that's what we're doing. And now I'm thinking, and that's the importance. Something else that we talked about is this thing about cognitive awareness, this ability to understand something. And Dr. Cleo made a very clear point that you can be aware of something on a cognitive level, on a conscious level. But what you got to understand is 96% of your behavior is governed by your subconscious.
That's right.
What's underneath that? What are you informing your subconscious of that allows it to make the decisions that govern your movements 96% of the time during the day? It's a bunch of people that are aware, hey, this is happening over there, but you're still holding the idea that they're controlling it.
Yes.
So you can know all day long that this is what you're doing to it, but if you think that they're the only one that holds the lever, you're going to always be waiting on them to release it.
And those are elements of what we teach in CTCA about the subconscious. And indeed, the subconscious running your life. And also the subconscious is where repressed stuff goes that you won't let out. The more you let out, honestly, the less the subconscious has power to overcome your life, because you have not put so much stuff there because you're being real about who you are. And another part about what you've been through, another part that we talk about, that this is inspired by Dr. Rich's comments, is that we teach our people the difference between training and education. Education affirms you. Education enhances you. Education makes you better than you were yesterday as you are. Training trains you like a dog. And most of what happens in the school system in this country is training. It's not education. Right. And even the Black Lives Matters movement, and I'm bringing that up because of the theme of this discussion of white codependence.
Good example.
The Black Lives Matters movement, which of course white people allow to become a household word and everywhere, is a white supremacist movement because it's telling us that it's making us all say, white people, please let us matter. White people, give us permission to matter.
Yeah.
That's what, because Black Lives Matter came out, murders of black people, and please let up on us. And I said when I was on Roland March, I said, we need some shirts that say, don't F with us.
That's right. Not hands up, don't shoot, please. No, that's begging to me.
We're not having it, is what our shirts should say, not BLM. And I won't get into that too much because that's not the main focus, but I'm talking about what we have to decode. Because you asked a question earlier about black leaders, and people have made the people who founded BLM black leaders. And I'm telling you what I know. The majority of the people who get credit for being black leaders don't even like black people. And they particularly don't like black men. Literally. The majority of the people that are in charge
we can do a whole show on that.
Was inspired by the murder of black men, supposedly. And they got paid and made all kinds of money, inspired by the body of Michael Brown out there where he lived and all these other black people. And they used us, but they got used.
Where are they now?
But they got, I want to put it where it belongs. So they got used. They got paid well for it, but they got used to use us by white supremacy mythology.
Yeah.
Because we are so, based on what a lot of what Dr. Rick said, and what I'm trying to explain, we're in this position right now of white codependence and anti-blackness, where we're waiting for them to give us some more carrots instead of going into our communities and transforming our communities and making our communities better places that are safe for our hearts and for our minds. And we got to teach our young people why white people will let something that's blackface becomes a household word. We got to be suspicious. We have a right to be suspicious. These blankety blanks enslaved us for over 200 years. We should be suspicious, but not suspicious just to be caught up in suspicion, but suspicious to be proactive against the next agenda. See, that's why I brought up the word agenda earlier. We don't want to, and you talk about your baby and you were protecting your child, and a lot of black people think they're protecting their child, but not saying that white people have an agenda. But we have to tell them. Not telling them to hate nobody or be mean and nasty too, but teach them to decode.
Identify.
So they can navigate through the society and be successful in ways that makes them not only assets to their own personal prosperity, but to black people. In short, I'm gonna make my point in short to tell you what I'm talking about that we have to reverse. The reason that schools like Yale and Princeton and stuff stay in existence, part of that is because of the alumni who continue to contribute to the organization's existence. Do you know that most HBCUs do not have any students that contribute back to the school? They don't have that same level of giving because those schools, and a faculty member at a very famous HBCU said this to me at a faculty meeting to my face. He said, we produce great students and we have a high graduation rate, but we do not create warriors for black people. This is what he said. He said, we don't create black people to invest back in black power. We create great students, which is why Bill and Oprah was getting so much money, that we produce hyper scholarly level assimilated black folks, even at a HBCU. So I say that because people in your audience might understand that, look, we got to teach our children to value black people at all costs and to devalue white supremacy in all of its elements, including Santa Claus, including white Jesus, including television, including the biracial agenda. That's goal is to teach black people not to be loyal to black people. That's what the biracial agenda is, to make sure that we're not loyal to people, to each other, and that our default is not black, but our default is either confused or white. That's an agenda. And if we teach our children that there's an agenda, they're less at risk to fall for it.
So it's basically we have to invest ourselves in, I guess, reprogramming the way that we see ourselves and other people who look like us, because we kind of been taught to see less than human when we look at our people, or we are taught to see an enemy, that we don't see a
We don't like
friend.
people. We don't like black people.
Right. And
And
that's a
there's
part of the program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a part of the program. And I think that what we have to understand, as Dr. Cleo said, when we tell our children the truth, okay, there's an agenda. Now there's an awareness of the agenda. So now I start to recognize things, and now it no longer seems like a natural part of the social construct. It's more of an agenda, that there are literally protocol-driven behaviors and situations in play that work against me. And this goes back to the beginning. If I have a sense of self, if I have a sense of identity, if I'm connected to my cultural heritage, my cultural anchor, beyond slavery, if I understand that my history didn't begin with slavery, then I'm aware of something beyond and something greater. And now I'm aware of any time that idea of me loving me is interrupted. And then I can ask the question. One of the things we do a very horrible disservice to our children with is we stop them from asking questions.
Yes.
One of the most dangerous things
because I said
that right there was one of the most dangerous realities in my house.
Come on.
That I literally had to talk to my grandparents about because I said so. The one thing that kids in my kids, we have 13, and none of them ever heard because I've said so. You are allowed to question anything that's going on. It has to be done in a way of respect. And it doesn't mean it's going to change my mind, but what it does mean is I hear you.
That's right.
And that you have a voice, and that you have a right to speak that voice, and I have no right to silence you, because what happens is when you sit up and you silence a child, you teach them to be responsive to being silenced.
Oh man.
So what happens is by the time our children make it into high school, they're used to being told to shut up.
Yes.
And shut up. They have no desire to buck the system because of the consequences that they've experienced at home.
And guess what, Dr. Rick? Guess what? This is important, I think, to add to some consideration in terms of what you're saying. You mentioned earlier, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember your exact word, but you basically mentioned that it's important to understand that we didn't start as slavery, and that we have a mighty culture in experience historically that preceded slavery. But let me tell you what happens, because we're in the trance. When we tell our children that we came from kings and queens and blah, 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 what they're thinking on an unconscious basis, sometimes a conscious basis, is what the hell happened then? Then what happened? Because look at you now. You know, you ain't blaming queens now. So on the unconscious basis, they're calling you a hotep, or they're telling you don't come to with that black stuff. Or you're radical, because you know a lot of black people think that the opposite of pro-black is anti-white, which is illogical, because the opposite of pro-black is anti-black. But being anti-black is not important. Being anti-white is important. So we forget about having a complaint about the anti-blackness. So we think that to be pro-black is anti-white. So therefore we try to put it on the side. But we got to deal with that anti-blackness, Dr. Rick, because when we break down what we've done, we're confused by how things are now. Because what black people actually did is not part of the curriculum. It's not part of what people's knowledge base. All they see is a brother on the street begging, or we don't got time for each other because we're living our best life and ain't going back and forth with those N words. So we have to, just like the unresolved recommendation of be as good as the white man, we got to tell the whole story. Or else inadvertently we become either anti-black or not completely have done our job regarding getting black people out of the trance. Because we're so deep in the trance, we're not impressed with what we did. I mean, we don't even know about Black Wall Street or Allentown or the D District in Washington, D.C. We can go on and on with the things that black geniuses have done. We're not impressed.
Right.
Because people are running shit. Pardon my cuss, and I hope your audience ain't upset about that.
You're fine.
But white folks are running stuff right now. Damn the pyramids. They are the ones who are my safety net now, and you're not challenging that. And we have to challenge that strategically, not just behaviorally or verbally, but our whole body and mind and way we show up in front of black people have to be part of how we challenge that notion. And we have to get we have to do more than talk about the pyramids.
Right.
You know, and because our children, there's a lot of Black people who are thinking to themselves, well, Blackness is not working. I'm going to become an American. I'm going to become a capitalist.
Oh,
Damn
Lord.
this Black stuff. And this biracial agenda is feeding into that impulse. And that's a very dangerous impulse. This biracial agenda, Dr. Ripken and Tony, it's poison to Black people.
I mean, that biracial agenda has so many different components. First and foremost, it's an automatic anti-Black sentiment in the sense that it professes, especially when you notice it's normally a situation that expresses itself as in, I can do better if I have this. And so it reinforces, especially when you talk about a Black man with a white woman, because now it reinforces another narrative that's pushed that Black men don't marry. I mean, Black men don't marry Black women, despite the fact that 89% of Black marriages include both Black and Black men and Black women. But that's not the narrative pushed.
That's going to change.
Oh, it's already began to change. There's a trend now moving towards interracial relationships because they're being promoted, and that seems to be a sense of value. The idea that I can now be accepted, I can earn approbation by having a non-Black spouse, is now it has a false value to it because I still believe that the white man's ice is colder.
Right.
So I don't see the beauty in myself. Whether you like this guy or not, wherever he falls on your thing, I don't tend to pay attention to messengers. I listen to what they say and I extract the message and I ask myself, does it make sense? I don't have to like you, but if you say something that resonates with me, I'm going to acknowledge it resonates because I don't care about what everybody else thinks. But to me, the most powerful thing that Umar Johnson ever said in his life was the most radical thing a Black man can do to connect himself to the Black struggle is be committed to a Black woman. To me, that's where it starts. If you can't see the beauty in the Black woman, and I tell Black men all the time when we're having this conversation, I say, let's be real, let's be transparent, let's be open. Let me tell you something, Black man. Let me tell you how dark this agenda is in white supremacy. You cannot aspire to have a white woman thinking that by having a white woman, you have married up without subconsciously thinking you're inferior to the white man.
That's right.
If you think the white woman is automatically inherently better than the Black woman, subconsciously you already see yourself as inferior to the white man. How can you ever compete with him when you already see him as your superior? You have to see the beauty and the power and the uniqueness of the Black woman in order to see it in yourself.
Well, if it wasn't for the inferiority complex that the brother had, he wouldn't have even done that. The whole thing is a reaction to an inferiority complex.
Yeah.
So,
that's why it's important for us to, as you said earlier, we have to break the trance. We have to break the trance of this mental slavery that we're stuck in. I know we're kind of out of time. I want to let you gentlemen get a final word in. I do want to say though that having this conversation with you, I think it's going to be really, really beneficial to a lot of people. It's been actually beneficial for me because I think it's going to prepare people to better identify the everyday anti-Blackness in our own subconscious and our rhetoric.
Yes.
The behaviors like walking down the street and you see a white person and you kind of shrink yourself a little bit to seem less intimidating. The code switching when you get around white people and you change the tonation of your voice and the way that you communicate. Like all of these things are mechanisms of this mental slavery and this low self-esteem. This
it's a as he said, it's a trance.
This trance that we're in, right? So
it's a trance.
So I would say, as my final thought, because I want to give you brothers the last word. My final thought would be to mirror what you said. We have to break this trance of mental slavery, and we have to also eliminate rhetorical questions. I love that, Dr. Manago. We have to eliminate rhetorical questions in order to bring our people to a place where they are encouraged and somewhat even forced to have to think for yourselves. You don't have to think like me. You don't have to agree with me. I always say that, we have a responsibility to, well, not only to think, but we have a responsibility to question everything that we've been taught. And we don't have to agree with it or disagree, but we have to question it, because if we don't, we are nothing more than mouthpieces for someone else's point of view. So I will give the floor to either one of you brothers to close this out. And I want to thank you both for joining us. Go ahead.
You're welcome. I'll go first. The thing that we have to be aware of, one of my greatest experiences, and I'm an avid reader to an extent that most people don't believe. And that's another thing we have to stop. We have to stop seeing Black people who do extraordinary things and immediately start to try to disqualify them instead of asking them how. We don't question white intellectuals or white academics about their credentials. We don't question them about where they learned it or how they learned it. First of all, most people don't have an understanding of what all of that means. My thing is, some of my greatest inspirations come from men who were autodidacts. You don't have to have that institutional credential to have the level of knowledge of most PhDs. And so I think that's important. But the idea of true understanding of the nature of who we are becoming, we've got to stop questioning the exceptions. But in my reading, one of my greatest experiences was reading Blackface, White Mask by Frantz Fanon, and understanding colonization and understanding that no matter where this has happened to us in the world, there's this theme. And I think Dr. Cleo has given it a wonderful description by calling it a trance, something everybody understands. Because when you say colonization, we've used it so much and we tend to use it as a weapon. So now it's insulting. When we talk about psychological chains, it's insulting. And it also speaks as if, okay, I'm speaking from a level so far above you that you can't understand me, which again is offensive. But when you say a person is in a trance, everybody's been in one. And they know the dangers. Some of us have been entranced by women. Some of us have been entranced by money. But we've all been entranced by something that didn't serve us well. And we know what the benefit of breaking the trance is. And so when we talk about that, but reading Blackface, White Mask, and even Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon opened up and it really explained the dynamics used by white society to literally bring a more superior mental set into captivity. It's if I control your environment, if I have the ability to extract from you your most precious asset, which is your identity. And then if I can superimpose a willingness to aspire to be who I am, something you can never attain. I am never going to be white. I am never going to fit into that no matter how much I try. It has nothing to do with education, has nothing to do with academic achievement, it has nothing to do with financial success. It has everything to do with understanding who I am by nature, my direct connectivity to the divine and how that empowers me. But if I can take that away from you, and then I can convince you that this is it over here, and then you can never have it, but you're always wanting it, and then I drop you breadcrumbs, I can manipulate and control your behavior. And more importantly, I can turn you against anybody who would dare challenge you to do something different. And so what we've got to do is systematically and deliberately come up with mechanisms like the ones created by Dr. Cleo. One that I've created is called Black Men Lead. It's a rite of passage initiative, specifically focused on young Black boys from 4 to 13 in a rite of passage, and then from 13 to 30 in the preparation and empowerment of what true Black manhood looks like through way of modeling. But in any scope of thing, what you've got to do is you got to take them out of the box. You got to give them permission to be outside of the box, because most have been conditioned under no circumstances do you leave the box. But what happens is, not only in that situation where I'm conditioned not to leave the box, by nature, I feel by thinking I'm protecting my brothers, I insist they stay in the box too. And so what happens is you got a bunch of people going back to the theme of what this show is about. Most people are telling you to stay in the box, not because they hate you, because they think you're making trouble, not only for them, but for yourself. I don't want to see you crash. So I want you to get back in the box and do what these people tell you to do. And that's traced all the way back to slavery. Massa gonna get mad. And everybody gonna be in trouble. So you need to get over here. And there was always that one, that Turner, and on the line that said, I don't care what Massa's talking about. And the thing is, that's the black man they want to quiet.
Yes.
The black man who's unapologetically black, who has no problem speaking truth and calls a spade, because if that black man infects other black men with his passion for his people, there's absolutely nothing that they can do to stop it.
That's right.
That's their greatest fear. These people gonna figure out who they are.
Yes.
I mean, I'm serious. That's their greatest fear. Oh God, they're gonna discover who they really are.
And who we are.
Right. Right. At the same time, discover who we are, and the gig is up.
That's right. That's right.
Right now, there is a horrible injustice occurring to people of African descent who are the most powerful war resistors against white supremacy in the Western world, and that's the Haitians. And I always have said, when I got the opportunity, that Haiti should be our Israel. I mean, without the invasion of somebody else's land. I'm talking about making them sacred and making people important. That should be our Israel equivalent, because those Africans were not playing, and they defeated Napoleon, who I was told when I was real little was an undefeated French general. I didn't know about Haiti and Toussaint Louverture and Dessalines and the people that were over there building the Citadel, Henri Christophe. And I mean, I've been there and I go to Haiti often, so I know a lot about it now. But as a child, I had no clue. Matter of fact, I thought they were crazy voodoo people, if anything, that's what I was told. But they're so profound in our history that I almost get moved to tears when I talk about them, because I know the truth. And we don't know, we have no clue that those people who are suffering horrendously are still paying the price for successfully and effectively counting white supremacy to its toes. And I mention that because our perspective of Haitian people is part of the white supremacy trauma trance and the brainwashing and being trained as opposed to educated. And what Biden just did by sending them, bringing Afghans over here and providing housing and finances that we pay taxes on for the Afghans, and sending Haitians back to a place where the leader was just assassinated, and there's clear disruption because they made sure it's disrupted. So I'm just deconstructing a contemporary phenomenon that's in our face that a lot of us don't realize what's going on, and that we're not even clear enough to be offended by how Biden is treating those Haitian people. One of the things I want to talk about is, and reiterate, is the importance of language, Black people. Earlier, slavery and slavery mentality was referenced, and indeed, slavery mentality is a problem. But I don't know how many of you have been to the continent, but I go to the continent quite often, particularly Central, so-called South and West Africa, and they're going through anti-Blackness too. Their judges and attorneys still dress like, I call them RuPaul. They still got on blonde wigs, and that's how the attorneys and the judges step into court looking like George Washington with that same hairstyle that's on your dollar bill. And the official language of Nigeria and Ghana is English. So the white supremacy mythology, trance, and invasion goes beyond Africans in this country. So it's not simply a slave mentality, because a lot of them were not chattels enslaved, but they are anti-Black. And the issue, in my opinion, here is anti-Blackness. The assault on Black humanity as a result of white supremacy that has been internalized into Black people is the problem. You said earlier, Tony, about somebody thinking that white people's ice is colder. Well, that's the result of anti-blackness. Because if you go to the continent, they think the white people's ice is colder too, because they have been successfully invaded and domesticated, not to the extent that we have, because they don't call themselves, not unless they're influenced by hip hop culture, the equivalent of the N-word. For example, the word kafir. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the word kafir, but in Azania, what we call South Africa, the Dutch call the Africans there kafirs, which has the same epistemology or the same meaning as the N-word. But because they have land and language memory, they are clear enough not to be, and they are clear enough to be insulted by the word, and they don't use it. There's not an equivalent song in Azania or Africa where they say, I living my best life. I don't got time to go back and forth. They don't. The kafir word will never have that same life. They reject it because they have the language, culture, and land memory to recognize an insult when they see it. Because we've been so successfully displaced and domesticated, we don't know an insult when we see it. So we call each other the N-word every day, even in so-called love and passion. We're assaulting ourselves. So words matter. And I'm going to finish this by going down a list of everyday words that are offensive. The word people of color is offensive. It means non-white. And we often say people of color to not say black because we don't want to offend white people. But it's an offensive word. The Trump administration came up with the word black identity extremists. Now they're white supremacist identity extremists, but they calling us for caring about black people identity extremists. The word little white lie is offensive because that's the good lie. And they don't even waste their time coming up with words like black trash or black slavery. In the English language lexicon, there's no such thing as the term black slavery, because when you said slavery, you've already covered it. By default, that means black people. There's no equivalent to there's no such thing as the term black trash in the English lexicon, because trash is already has another black of association, not that have to put black on it. But there is terms like white slavery and white lies. And the unsaid implication, which goes into the subconscious, like Dr. Rick talked about earlier, in terms of the subconscious running our lives, all the anti-implications of these words goes into the subconscious and we implode, which includes being abusive to each other, sometimes to the point of becoming criminalized and going to jail, domestic violators, gang members that only kill black people, etc. This is how we act out all that stuff in the subconscious that's being fueled by everyday words like black on black crime. Like Dr. Rick said, in absolute terms, and when it comes to the numeric count, white on white crime is on a higher level in terms of frequency than so-called black on black crime. But the term white on white crime is not part of the English lexicon. It doesn't exist. Like he said, people experience murder based on proximity, based on who they with. Most Asians are killed by Asians, most whites are killed by whites, etc. So I'm just breaking down words that we need to take out of our normalization of how we talk, including the N-word, including sit your black ass down. I was at a very popular department store recently where a little black boy was taking too long for his mother in terms of keeping up with the rest of the family. And she said, N-word, if you don't get your black ass over here, I'm gonna beat the black off of you.
Yeah.
And I told her while we were in line waiting for our stuff, I wrote a really nice letter to her that said a lot of stuff, but including telling her to say, don't tell your children that you're gonna beat the black off of them, because that implies that being black is disposable. That it can be removed because of its lesser value. And like your little boy who saw the world around him because he can see, all of our children see the world around them and they're coming to conclusions without our input. And like somebody once said, if we don't educate our children, somebody else will, and somebody else is. And they're turning them into anti-black people to grow up and be like Obama Harris.
Yep. Yes.
Who brought in the first lady who's a white man, if you know what I'm saying. I mean, he's not a lady. I'm talking about
right.
A black woman in quotes did that. But our children are watching. They're watching the whole thing, and if they're watching it, and many of them are because they don't have you as a father. If they're watching it without a critical analysis, they're at high risk to be anti-black, and that tendency is underscored by the biracial agenda of the television and all the anti-white. And I'm gonna close with this. Even in the movie that we loved, which was Black Panther, people, I mean, literally all over the world, Africans lined up, even in Ghana and Africa, to see that film. However, part of our saving grace was the CIA. I don't know if you all saw. If you all saw Black Panther, but they had a white boy who was in the CIA who compromised Malcolm, who compromised Marcus Garvey, who compromised the Black Panthers. They had the CIA on our side fighting against Black people in Wakanda. This is what they do. This is what they do to our heads. And if we have a critical analysis, our children go, I like the movie, it was cute and everything, but I saw what you did.
Right.
If our children can do that, and they can, they have the capacity to beat everybody's ass at tennis in the world and have to play each other, among other things. They can do this too, but not with our guidance. We have to guide them with love. No matter how much they piss us off, we can't go, God, that fucking coon. We can't do that.
That's right.
Because we're giving Black children permission to diss other Black people more than they diss white supremacy mythology.
It is easier to bring up, raise strong children than to repair broken men. And I think that's why I'm always very heavy.
And girls.
And women, right. I'm just speaking according to the quote, but yes.
Frederick Douglass.
Douglass, yes. So for me, I'm very invested in our younger generation. I'm actually quite impressed with this younger generation. I think they have a tremendous capacity for critical thinking. And I think they're a lot braver than a lot of people from my generation who have, in my opinion, feel like we've been beaten down by, I don't know if it's time, by just this long pattern of, I don't know, hopelessness, but it's frustrating. It's frustrating for me.
I hope our next conversation is about that, because I don't agree. I don't think these children are, I don't think they're the strongest, and I don't agree with that at all. I think they have more audacity, but they're no less anti-Black than the previous generation.
I'm talking about Gen Z, though. I want to be clear, because we have like a little separation of generations. And
next show, because we don't got time.
Okay, we'll talk about that.
Debate about that.
Okay, and last thing, I love the fact that you said there's certain words we must eliminate. I would also ask that we eliminate certain phrases from our mouths. Like one that I hate is "we ain't our grandparents," or "we ain't our ancestors." That's how it goes. It's like, you think you're actually like fighting back or speaking affirmation for your people, but you're insulting them at the same time. Even when you're.
But that's a part of the plan. That's a part of the plan.
They're saying that while not even knowing history.
Right.
Ask them who Mary Ford was and why Mary Ford was both hung and burnt alive, and her baby was snatched out of her body and stomped. Ask them who Mary Ford. Well, they don't know. So they're talking all this stuff about they're not their grandpa. They don't know their grandfather. That's why they're saying that.
Yeah, they couldn't have handled nothing like it was going on back then anyway.
My response is, when I hear a kid say that, obviously it's not my kid.
Right.
But if I hear a kid say that, I'm like, no, you're not. You're not your ancestors. No,
okay.
You're exactly
definitely
right.
Are not.
You're exactly right. And then I just leave it at that. What I've done is open the door. Look, you might not acknowledge it now. I just hit a nerve.
Yes.
You might want to look deeper. You might want to really, truly examine who they were, because the fact that you're even able to sit up here and say, I'm not my grandparents or I'm not my ancestors, is because they were who they were. Because a weaker people would have met their demise in totality through an effort of genocide. We just can't be destroyed. And you got to understand the audacity and the tenacity of our heritage. in the fact that a weaker people could not, the very people who put us through this couldn't have gone through what they put us through. And the greatest fear is that we're going to do it to them.
Yep. Amen.
And so those are the things that we need to look at. But you're on point. Yeah, I think we need to come back and have that conversation about where this generation is. I agree to this point with Dr. Cleo in the sense that I think they're more audacious and they have the greater potential for radicalization. But in the sense of being aware of who they are, they're losing touch. They are moving deeper into the trance of the sense of what is. And a lot of their striking back is, again, striking back at the wrong thing. They're still striking back at the ancestors instead of the system.
Maybe I'm thinking more so capable of retaining, of receiving information. Maybe that's probably a better way of phrasing it. But we'll definitely discuss that the next time. But once again, I appreciate having you gentlemen on. It has been my honor, and I look forward to doing this again. And to everyone watching, thank you very much for joining us for this episode of Community Town Hall. Just hold on for just 20 seconds, guys, and I'll see you.